He is Dr. Nadine Haddadine, who was an NHS doctor for 15 years and has been suspended for his posts on Twitter on the Gaza genocide. He's one of many, but we need to hear his story. Dr. Nadim, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Let's begin by hearing from you. What exactly happened to you?
Thanks for having me, George. And as you say, this is something that's happening to far too many people. So I've been a doctor in emergency and acute medicine for about 15 years for the NHS, with about 90% of that time spent working at the Royal Free Hospital in northwest London. In fact, serving one of the best, biggest Jewish communities in London, if not in the country. And I am of British Jordanian heritage. 90% of my family live in Jordan. And anybody who has family in Jordan, anybody who's born in Jordan, anybody from that part of the world has a very strong ingrained passion for the rights of the Palestinian people. And those feelings for those rights have been a very important part of me for as long as I can remember. They didn't appear in the last, year and a half, or certainly since October the 7th, the year before last. I arrived to work on the 14th of August last year, and I was doing my ward round as I would normally do. And I received an email from the responsible officer at the trust, which basically said, some concerns have been raised and you are suspended with immediate effect. There was no explanation as to what the concerns were, why I'd been suspended. But essentially I had to go around the department asking, other colleagues, consultants, if they knew what I'd done wrong. And I think you would hear from anybody else in that situation. As a doctor, your first instinct is to think, who have you brought to harm? Has there been some medical case that the General Medical Council hasn't told you about, or it hasn't yet come to, to fruition or come to light that you've harmed somebody? So I ended up sort of tootling home like a naughty schoolboy, feeling broken, for want of a better word, having to call the GMC and say, have I done something that I don't know about? They didn't have anything on file. And then I was invited to what was described as an informal meeting the next day with the responsible officer and the head of HR, which to me was not very informal at all. And I was prepared for a 2 or 3 week formal investigation because of a complaint that had come through anonymously about posts about the conflict that were potentially upsetting. I wasn't allowed to see the posts. I couldn't confirm that it was my ex account. I wasn't privy to the specifics of the complaint. But despite being told I was going to go through a formal investigation that would potentially lead me to a GMC investigation or dismissal, I was encouraged to delete my posts, which I thought was weird, given that they were going to investigate me. And then when I contacted them to say, look, I've deleted the posts while I was waiting for more information on the investigation, they did a complete U-turn and said, well, you've deleted your account now, you can come back to work. Which I tried to do. I tried to return back to work for a couple of shifts, but just felt this utter sense of resentment towards an unknown colleague who might have reported me, or really this kind of lack of respect for the amount of time that I'd served there. So with all that in mind, certain things from that meeting were basically just ringing through my head constantly. The first was that the responsible officer suggested that as part of my investigation, I bring in an expert on the conflict to advise on what was acceptable. And I sort of sat there and said, are you asking me to provide a history lesson? Do you want me, should we stop this meeting now and we'll say, well, in 1948, or have you heard of the Nakba? Or do you understand that my family all live in Jordan? And not only is the impact going to be on the Palestinians, but very much potentially on my family.